Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulil kareem. My name is Haaris, Ahmed, and I wasn't supposed to be the moderator of this session, but we have here Amany, Killawi from Launch Good and myself. Inshallah, we're not going to spend too much time on bios. Inshallah, those are available on the ISNA app or in your booklets. Suffice it to say that both of us, alhamdulillah, have had a lot of experience with crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, both, and we'll talk about that. So really quickly, how many people know what crowdsourcing is? Okay. How many people think there's a difference between crowdfunding and crowdsourcing? Okay, so then that means that nobody really knows what crowdsourcing is exactly. So crowdsourcing is generally a term that's thought to have been coined in 2005 by Wired magazine. It combines the word crowd with outsourcing. Now, you are correct that crowdfunding is a type of crowdsourcing, but it's not the only thing. And so this talk is going to be broader than that, but we will obviously touch upon crowdfunding, inshallah. So generally the definition, and it's a broad definition and there's some disagreements, but is that it is a solicitation of ideas, services, funding, ideas, services, and funding, essentially online mostly, from a large group, so a large disparate group. So that's pretty broad. And examples of crowdsourcing that are not crowdfunding, one example that you all have heard of is Wikipedia. How many people have heard of Wikipedia? I think everybody's pretty much heard of Wikipedia. So that is actually an example of crowdsourcing, and it's probably one of the most prominent examples. Reddit is another one that some of you may have heard of if you're in the startup space or the tech space. Even, how many of you are on Facebook? Probably most of you. Before you came here, how many of you asked your friends, where can we eat at ISNA? Or something like that, right? I saw a lot of posts like that. So actually, that's an example of crowdsourcing because you probably got back different responses and the debates over where you should eat and all this kind of stuff. But what you were doing was using your network, this group of people, to get information in an efficient manner using an online tool. So even using Facebook in that way is actually crowdsourcing. So we're going to talk about a lot of those different aspects, but what we're first going to talk about is what you probably thought what crowdsourcing was. And I'm going to let Amany come and talk, Amany Killawi. She is a co-founder of Launch Good. I am also a co-founder of Launch Good. It's a crowdsourcing platform, crowdfunding platform for Muslims. So she's going to talk about that in just some slides, inshallah.
All right, so can everybody see me? Okay, so you can hear me and see me. Okay, I want to just start off with a really small exercise to take Haaris's point to a whole nother level. So if everybody can stand up just for a second. So if you thought you were just going to kind of relax, just a couple minutes. Okay, all right. This might be difficult, but for those who can see me, just follow my lead, okay? So just watch what I'm going to do. All right, let's see. Okay, ready? All right. Alright, so what you just noticed right now essentially was we crowdfunded noise within the room, right? So we crowdsourced noise in the room. So the idea here is that within crowdsourcing, there's a tremendous power of the crowd, which is what I want to focus about more intensely. So when you do this in stadiums, it's amazing, and that's the idea of it. So a little bit about my background and what we're doing here. Haaris already talked about it. A lot of what I'm going to show today is case studies from Launch Good. He already did the quick intro. It's a global crowdfunding platform to support Muslims launching good across the world. So, crowdfunding is actually not very new. If you go to, Friday prayer, there's somebody walking around with a box and they're collecting donations, right? So that essentially is crowdfunding. But what technology allows us to do is take it to a whole nother level. The best definition that you can think of when it comes to crowdfunding is taking a large amount of people who are giving small amounts of money online to make a project happen. Very, very basic. So I had an example, but I'm going to kind of skip that. So here's a quick view of what a crowdfunding campaign looks like. So on the top, you typically have a tagline and the title. And then on the left side, we have the pitch. This is sort of the breakdown of your campaign, what it's about, the context. On the right side, or my left side, you have rewards. And these are what people give at different sort of giving levels. And then you have the title, and of course, the goal. What makes crowdfunding specifically different is that it's time specific. So most campaigns are only about 30 days. And that's because people procrastinate. And so if you give them a set deadline to support, they're more likely to get involved. Now, I want to take a step back here and talk about the realm of crowdfunding, because it's, there's a lot of hype around crowdfunding. What is it about? What does it do? But even a step further, throughout my presentation, I'll talk about the different types of crowdfunding, why specifically crowdfunding is so impactful as a type of crowdsourcing, and then why us as a Muslim community have an amazing opportunity to take crowdfunding to another level. So those are kind of the quick outline of that whole presentation. All right, this is sort of kind of an awkward setup. So here's the 4 different types of crowdfunding. Now, there's a lot of hype about equity crowdfunding, and I'll get into that in a second. The first one that I predominantly use more, or me and Haaris predominantly focus on, is donation-based crowdfunding. And so, for example, you have a nonprofit, and you want to raise $30,000 or $20,000 for your nonprofit, or specific programming within your nonprofit, right? If I donate $10 to your nonprofit, I might get a Facebook shout out. I might get maybe a thank you letter in the mail, but I'm not getting anything else in exchange. I'm mostly supporting it because I believe in the mission and the vision of your campaign. Then there's a second type of crowdfunding, which is pre-sales. Now, what's cool about this model is that it's great for entrepreneurs. So you can test the idea of a product in a very risk-free way. So, anybody heard of Naduna? Nadine's, okay, so this is the first Muslim workout DVD that was crowdfunded on LaunchGood. And they raised about $18,000. And the way they did it is only if you pledged in advance, and if they reached their goal with $18,000 in total pledges, the DVD gets made, right? And the cool thing about this model is for a lot of entrepreneurs, whether you have an app or you have a product you're trying to launch, you can test the demand of the idea in a very risk-free way. The third model is debt-based crowdfunding. And we've seen this model more with non-interest-based loans. So a lot of students don't want to pay interest for their tuition. So one of the things we've done is paired together with an organization called the Continuous Charity. And what they do is they provide non-interest-based loans. So you could actually crowdfund a loan, maybe $10,000 or $8,000 for your tuition from your local friends and family. Then they would take that amount and you would have to pay it back after a set year or two. Then they would take that same amount and loan it to someone else. So it's a very innovative way to use crowdfunding to further education. Then you've got equity. So equity is all the hype right now. And the whole idea behind equity is, for example, you might have a company or a business, and what you do is to get that startup capital, you have a campaign. And by the way, all the campaigns take the same shape as this. There's usually a goal, there's 30 days or some sort of set deadline, rewards, perks, etc. The rewards obviously vary. If it's equity, the rewards you're getting are actually shares of the company. So with equity crowdfunding, a good example of that is Alchemia. Has anybody heard of Alchemia? Okay, great. So it's like a Netflix for the Muslim world, for the Muslim community, and this is coming out of the UK. They have a much more robust sort of equity crowdfunding platform, or general equity crowdfunding platforms in here in the US. So this is another type which is really great for entrepreneurs looking to just kind of start up an idea. So that's a little bit about the different types of crowdfunding. What I want to get into now is why is crowdfunding so impactful as a type of crowdsourcing, right? What makes it so impactful? And then later I'm going to get into why the Muslim community is one of the best communities to actually champion this as a type of crowdfunding. So the first thing, it's very decentralized. I used to be a youth organizer, and when I would organize, I didn't have access to big donors, and I didn't have, it wasn't the right season for grants, and so I used to crowdfund and support a lot of those initiatives. And because it was accessible to me as a 19 or 20-year-old youth organizer at the time, it was really important. and I was able to utilize it. The other thing is it's very versatile, so you can use it for so many different ways, which I just mentioned, right? You've got equity crowdfunding, you've got debit-based crowdfunding. It's a pretty versatile platform in itself, and it's very transparent. So before, if you had to take money from maybe one or two specific foundations, you were sort of held, you were accountable to them. With crowdfunding, accountability, there's maybe hundreds of people you're accountable to, but at very small levels. And then last, in terms of the top part, is it's an amazing medium of culture production. So I'll give you a really quick example. Smartwatches, they actually originated from a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter. So if anybody remembers the Pebble Watch, that actually, the whole smartwatch craze started from a campaign that went viral on Kickstarter and raised a ton of money. And now, I think in the next 5-10 years, smartwatches will become the norm. Another example to think about is 25% of the films that go to the Sundance Film Festival have actually been crowdfunded. And so you see here, it's a very easy way to use it as a medium for cultural production. And then last but not least is, crowdfunding is publicity first and foremost. And I think what a lot of people forget is it's not so much about the money, it's more about the stories you're telling through the crowdfunding. And we've seen what it typically has done is it generates a lot of case studies. So people start to think, okay, wow, I can crowdfund my tuition to go to Bayina. So you have one person that crowdfunds their tuition to Bayina, somebody sees that, they get excited, they start to crowdfund their tuition to go to Qadam, people start using it to crowdfund their tuition, to finish their bachelor's degree in Islamic studies, etc. So that's really kind of the beauty of that. I want to share a couple case studies here on the bottom. So on the far right, coconuts for classrooms. So this was a campaign actually in Sri Lanka, and essentially you can, for $11, buy a coconut tree that then would become a source of, or an income, a source of revenue stream for this one school in Sri Lanka. And so what's really cool about crowdfunding is for the diaspora, right? You can support some of these initiatives, which for a student, $11 is actually very feasible, right? I can do that. I know I was able to make a difference. On the second one is a youth empowerment program. So when we talk about, I think, economic opportunity, I think part of it is creating opportunities for youth to be engaged in their communities in a safe space where they can build those skills. So this was actually an incubator space for youth in Detroit. And from there, they would pitch initiatives to investors in their community to get seed money, and that was crowdfunding. That was actually my first crowdfunding campaign. Then you have Naduna, the workout DVD I just talked about, was a pre-sale model. Anybody a fan of cereal? Okay, all right, so the whole Adnan Saeed case was actually crowdfunded, so you could crowdfund legal expenses, which, 10 years ago, you may have never thought of that. And then obviously nonprofits. Okay, so in the developing world, I'll be very honest, crowdfunding is still a very developed world phenomenon. Most of the campaigns I've seen haven't come from Kenya or Indonesia or South Africa. And the reason is because you have to be online, so these communities, if it's a cash-based economy, it won't work as well. If you're paying for goods in person, it won't work that well. You have to be online, there has to be credit cards involved. And so there's a challenge there in terms of a lot of the campaigns that do well, that tend to affect the developing world, are being crowdfunded in the UK, in the US, Australia. And so a lot of that money is coming from diasporic communities. However, there's a lot of potential in that. So there's a huge study on crowdfunding in the developing world. And what's fascinating about that is they're predicting that the developing world is actually going to leapfrog the developed world in terms of crowdfunding. And part of that is because most people now have access to phones. If you have access to the internet and you have this computer in your pocket, then you have access to capital. And so there's a lot of predictions around crowdfunding actually being a game changer in the developing world. So I talked a little bit about the impact that crowdfunding has. I talked a little bit about the different types of crowdfunding, but I want to focus on why the Muslim community is in a very unique position to utilize crowdfunding and champion amazing causes. So a little bit about the Muslim community. Some of us already know these stats. There's 1.6 billion worldwide. The majority are under the age of 25. There's a specific category of actually Muslims that we call gummies, global, urban, educated, English speaking. And they're predominantly in the US, UK, Australia. And another thing that we know about the Muslim community is that we're very generous, right? And that's kind of a no-brainer. Charity is a big tenet of our faith. Another thing to think about is there's a strong affinity of religion. Even if you're not practicing, even if you don't consider yourself a practicing Muslim, charity is still a very strong cultural tendency. So to even take that point another level, in the UK there's a crowdfunding platform called Just Giving, and they discovered that of their users, one of the most generous group was the Muslim community. So to summarize, we have this amazing tendency to give charity. We're growing in numbers, and on top of that, a lot of these 170 million gummies are urban, educated Muslims, and so they're a very ripe community for crowdfunding. They get it. Now, crowdfunding is growing, right? So it's growing. It's now a $10 billion market, and not only that. So not only within like the developing world, it's growing, but in the developing world, it's growing. But within the developing world, it's estimated to be a $100 billion market. And again, I talked about that leapfrog mechanism. So how does this all make sense, right? You've got Muslim community growing, you've got crowdfunding growing. Now, here's where it really comes home. So for us, our vision is to create an ecosystem that inspires, propels, and support Muslims to launch good across the world. And crowdfunding is just that right. It's just the right medium for this. For a lot of Muslims today, regardless of where you live, we're still very emotionally connected. And a good example of this is when the Chapel Hill shooting happened, right? So this is a map of basically the hashtag Chapel Hill shooting, where it was very popular. And you'll see here that it actually was even more popular than Valentine's Day. And so what this tells you is that although there's a lot of sort of differences in terms of the Muslim community, emotionally we're still connected, and technology allows us to kind of channel that emotional energy into something productive. So when you think about, in closing, you've got a Muslim community that's growing, you've got a community that's increasingly tech savvy, growing in spending power. Remember I talked about the gummies, and on top of that, they're more socially justice oriented, and so they're using now technology as a tool to take it to another level. I'm going to let Haaris talk a little bit about some examples of that with Whitestone.
All right. Yeah, there'll be Q&A actually. We'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. So anyways, you can see that screen. So in addition to LaunchGood, I'm involved with some other initiatives that fit in with the crowdsourcing space. One of them is the Whitestone Foundation, which I'm going to talk to you about today. The other, if we have time, well, there's a few others that if we have time, there are other examples of crowdsourcing, so we'll talk about those. That's Patronicity, which is a sister company to LaunchGood. But there's a really unique program within that we want to talk about as well. And then NeighborFix, which is a marketplace for neighbors to help neighbors. And then CrowdFeed, which is a crowdsourced way of paying for homeless people and those in need at the point of sale. So if somebody walks into a pizza store, the vendor can send out a notification and people can just pay for it right there. So we'll talk about those when we get to that. But Whitestone Foundation is an organization, it's a community-based organization that's dedicated to a world where Muslims lead on positive values. So that's the vision, I mean, to get there. We don't believe we're there right now, but it's the vision to get there. Now, how we go about doing that is we believe in leveraging the resources, the broad resources of the Muslim community, and bringing them together. And through that, through idea exchange and knowledge share, we feel that we can elevate the level and the quality of Muslim programming and the effectiveness. So towards that, to put it into concrete terms, we've developed different tools to do this, and we have a general process. So one of the tools that we're looking at in terms of knowledge share is called, I'm trying to see if I can get there. Okay, I can see. As Amany said, it's a little bit awkward in terms of setting up. This is called Whitestone Brainstorm. How many of you have heard of Product Hunt? I don't expect a lot of people, but if you're in the tech space or in the startup space at all. Anybody heard of Product Hunt? Wow, okay. So that shows I'm in a bubble. It's actually one of the most popular, how many of you have heard of TechCrunch? Have you ever okay, so Product Hunt is, TechCrunch is old now. Product Hunt is where you're going to see like the new ideas and the new startups, and you're going to see them in almost real time. And basically, it's the hottest thing. People can post different ideas every day. Like if they see an idea, a really cool company or anything like that, they'll just post it and it'll kind of show up. So it's been very effective. Millions of people use it, and there's a lot of collaboration that has resulted from it. So on that model, we've created something called the Whitestone Brainstorm. And this is aimed at the Muslim community. And we feel that there's a lot of innovation going on within our own Muslim community. There's a lot of really neat things that are happening across our nation and actually across the world. But we don't share enough with each other, right? And so one thing that Muslims are really, really good at, mashallah, is reinventing the wheel. And we're amazing at it, right? And so alhamdulillah, that's great, but we feel that that's not something we should be doing. And this is one of the tools that we've designed that once the network builds up will become a very useful tool, we hope, inshallah, bidnillah. So as you can see, I mean, these are just examples. The network still, we've just launched this, it's in beta, and so we're still even fixing up some stuff in terms of formatting and whatnot. But so you're getting really the first view of it over here. But as you can see, I mean, right now it's broken up by days. Eventually we'll have themes and whatnot, so we might say, let's go for ideas around helping disabled Muslims, right? Or even the disabled in general. And now you're going to say, you know, people are going to post stuff about what Muhsin's doing. People are going to post stuff about how their masjid became disabled friendly. They're going to post they're going to post ideas about their Jummah being having ASL, sign language, things like that, right? So you're going to start to see these great ideas. And the point is, if you now want to implement that in your community, I mean, you get the idea. You can go ahead and do it, or you can share what's going on. Let's choose something. Oh, I see, I'm not connected. Okay, I thought I was connected. So anyway, I'm going to connect to that. So anyway, the point is that you'll be able to comment on these different ideas, and then you can also tag other ideas that might be similar, right? So you might see something that's similar to the idea that you've seen, and then you can actually then comment on that. But, so I hope I can show the other things actually over here. What does it say? Okay, so let's try to choose it again. All right, so yeah, so you'll see this kind of pop up, and now you can just comment, you can put your comment, and then you'll see like other people kind of saying, hey, this is a great idea. You know what it would be better is if you kind of made sure that you had an ADA guide with it, or, you know, how did you do it? Did you guys have a consultant? Whatnot. So you can bounce ideas off each other. So that's Whitestone Brainstorm. One of the other things I wanted to show you was what we call the idea exchange. So the idea exchange is a little bit more, it's a little bit more exclusive. It's invite only, and it's designed for thought leaders, influencers, anybody that's doing something, but you have to get an invite and then you have to log in to see what's going on. So that allows for conversations that are a little bit more private and people may be a little bit more open. So what I want to show here is a challenge. So recently there's been a spate of imams, high-profile imams, leaving their masajid, right? Hot button issue. It's an issue that comes up, unfortunately, a lot, right? So it's very hard to retain talented imams for whatever reasons. So we wondered, what is that? I mean, those who are succeeding perhaps, or what are the ideas that are out there, maybe that are already in place or that people might have? And so we issued this challenge with our network and pull people in. So how can mosques and community centers attract and retain engaged and qualified imams and religious leaders that will help their communities thrive, right? So a lot goes into even asking the question, right? The question itself is very important because the input that you get, and this is true of any kind of crowdsourcing, right? Even with crowdfunding. If you don't lay out a good campaign that tells a story, you're not going to get a lot of good feedback, right? So the same way with crowdsourcing, if you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get a lot of good input. So you have to craft the question carefully so that you get more open-ended answers and answers from different perspectives and whatnot. So in any case, you'll see a synopsis over here that allows us to provide different information and background. That's also important when it comes to crowdsourcing. Of course, people have their own knowledge, but providing them with other knowledge that you already have as a baseline increases the quality of what you're going to get back. So this applies to whatever platform you're using. It really it makes a difference. So we laid out different resources here, even resources for brainstorming and storyboarding and things of that sort, but also articles and videos, that discuss the topic. So that way you have a baseline to start with. Now if you'll see underneath here, there's a commenting feature. Now this is different than a standard blog in that, and these features are being rolled out, but if you were to actually list a resource like a link or upload a document or whatnot, that will now go up into the, it'll automatically go up into the resources over there, right? So now whenever anybody comes to this page, they'll see resources that people put up, and you'll have that available. So out of this discussion so far, I just want to give an example of how this can kind of work. So here, and this is another point. Even in Product Hunt, you can have a platform, but you have to have somebody who's actively managing it, moderating it, and actually putting, driving the discussion. And as such, we had somebody who was watching the discussion and continuously pulling out the key points and then kind of summarizing them. So as of right now, these are some of the things that we had in terms of retaining talented imams and whatnot. So you see, like, discuss candidates with local community imams and masjids, peer interview of candidates, conducted by local imams and the board. And you may or may not agree with these, but these are the summary of the suggestions, right? And then saying the decision making is not just in the hands of a few, making sure that the community is engaged and involved, right? And this is coming from real experiences from people who've already gone through this and maybe perhaps had success doing it. So that's one that's an example of a challenge. Now, the other thing that we do is, and so here's an ideal process. Let me walk you through a process. We have a challenge that we issue, and the challenge is such that we say, what's the most effective way for us, for Muslims, to provide affordable healthcare in the era of the Affordable Care Act, right? Affordable healthcare to the underinsured and the working poor in the era of the Affordable Care Act. Very specific question, a very relevant question for those who are in that space, right? And so then what we're going to get back is people are come back with different suggestions. There's a network model, there's a model of federally qualified healthcare centers, whatever it might be. I don't want to get into the technical aspects of that because that's not what this session is about. But we'll get different suggestions for solutions and things like that from experts, from other people, whether through the brainstorm site or through the idea exchange. Out of that, if we see that this thing has some legs, that there's some interesting models that are out there that are not really prevalent, that people don't know about or that are not really out there. So that was a real case. We saw a model that was in Southern California. Anybody heard of the organization called MINDS? M-I-N-D-S. Anybody from California at all? Okay, so if you're in California, Southern California, you probably heard of MINDS. I don't know, but anyways, they're a very effective organization. They were providing a specialist network for those who were underserved. Right? So specialists just donate time in their offices, and then they pull them in. And these guys would actually centrally triage, right? They would figure out what's wrong and send you to a neurologist or a urologist or whatever it is, and they're giving you slots. Like, I'm going to give you 10 slots a month or whatever it might be. Great idea. It's an award-winning program, been very effective. The beauty of it is it fit with our vision. It's Muslim-led, but it's almost all non-Muslims in the network. It's Muslim-led for sure, but a lot of the physicians are not Muslim. Just because it was a great idea and it was actually adding value to society. So in any case, we saw that this is the model we want to take, and we provided consulting there, operational consulting and whatnot. We refined the model through more input, from some of the comments that we'd gotten and feedback that we'd gotten, and improved the model, right? We got them, we documented things, we put MOUs together, knock that out. We put MOUs and different things, and we even developed a centralized app for them. So what that did is, now we said, okay, we can take this around to the rest of the nation, right, to other communities, the same model. Now, imagine 10 communities doing the same thing that they're doing, and they have everything, a roadmap. From day one, this is what you're supposed to do. This is, by day 5, you should have approached 5 different physicians in this specialty. By day 10, you should have, right? So you have the whole thing laid out, and we've been able to benefit from what they've already done. And inshallah, we're increasing the benefit. So that might be the process. Now, one of the other things that we want to put in the process is, we would ideally, 30 days, we start the conversation, you're discussing it on the idea exchange and whatnot, and we come to a conference that is designed like an actual in-person conference with experts. It's designed to actually discuss these things. Now, in a traditional setting, we'll get up here in a panel and we'll just have prepared from whatever our knowledge is, right? What if 30 days in advance, if we really had the network, you guys could be giving your input, people could be giving their input from all the way in Australia or wherever it is. Now when we get up here, to give a discussion or discuss, we know a lot more than what we knew before, right? Because we crowdsourced that information. And then we continue the conversation after. Let's say we leave this conference, we had some discussion about networks or whatnot, and you guys now add on to the conversation because you're dying to give your input, but we didn't get to have everybody raise their hand and give their comments or whatever it might be, right? You can continue that conversation, and how much time do I have? Yeah, I should have, right. So, I know I got that. We're not going to take that one. But so that's the idea, right? Is to open up that conversation and to continue it, and then that's truly crowdsourcing. We're combining the offline with the online, right? That we're going to, inshallah, come to the best solution. Now. So this is an example, for example, this is an actual session we have tomorrow for storytelling. And once the network builds up, we'll get more responses or whatnot. When we don't have that many initial responses, we figure in the beginning, somebody's already started posting some stuff and some resources and whatnot. But what will happen is after the session, at least for 30 days, we'll continue the conversation. How many times have we been able to actually continue the conversation other than in social media where it's not really preserved in one place that we can come back to and access it for useful ideas and thoughts? So that's kind of the idea, to keep the conversation going. Now, I told you I would talk about a few other things. So Patronicity, again, it's a sister site to LaunchGood. So this is not actually focused on the Muslim community. This is more about hyper-local crowdfunding. And this is an important point, even from the topic of our session. How do we give back through crowdsourcing, or how do we use crowdsourcing to benefit? It doesn't have to be a Muslim-focused initiative, right? We can just be Muslims within our regular society helping others. And Patronicity, inshallah, is an example of that, where it's hyper-local crowdfunding, so you're funding things in your local community. And in particular, what I wanted to highlight was this program called Public Spaces, Community Places. So this is actually a partnership with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And what they did is they actually gave us about 1.5 million, inshallah 2 million for this next year, dollars to match crowdfunding projects for public space reactivation, right? So what they did is they said, okay, if your project is for $50,000 to turn an alley into a green alley, which is a real project, right? We will give $50,000 if they raise the $50,000, right? That's an incredible incentive. So what that did is it got a lot of people involved and engaged that really wanted to see it happen because they knew the $50,000 would be coming. And they told their friends, they pushed it. And alhamdulillah, so far this year, we finished the first year with them, and we had a 97% success rate, alhamdulillah. Okay, 97% success rate in crowdfunding, and Amany will tell you that is unheard of. It's unheard of. And so, this matching program, and then the fact that it was actual projects that were within your own community that you were going to see, right? Like a park or a green alley, or let's look at some of the other things. There's murals. I'll tell you, there's a sports complex there. One of the things I really like, these tennis courts, they redid the tennis courts. So again, great projects, but done through using the crowd, using the local community, and then in fact even adding a layer of matching. So that's another one. And I already kind of gave you an overview of some of the other initiatives, and these are crowdsourcing. And these did stem, my co-founder and I, this stemmed from an idea of, we have values as Muslims, and we're not always able to, we want to live our values, but we're not always able to, right? And so one of them, for example, how many of you have heard of the hadith that you're responsible for your neighbors, essentially, you're responsible for your neighbors 40 over and 40 across, right? Now, how many of you ever thought about that and said, how am I supposed to do that? Short of becoming the mayor of my town or something like that, or the association president or something, whatever it might be, right? It's a pretty big thing. So actually NeighborFix came out of that. It was an idea, and this is meant for everybody, not just for Muslims, but it's a platform it's an app, so I can't really show it to you here, but it's an app for neighbors to help neighbors. where they can do tasks for each other, and they can pay each other or they can pay it forward. Like they can pay it to a charity or whatnot. And again, that's an example of crowdsourcing, because again, you're going to the crowd for help with your screen door repair, your power wash, your snow blowing in your driveway, whatever it might be, right? So it's another example of that. And then lastly, crowdfeed, which, you know, inshallah, we pray that inshallah Allah puts barakah in it. We're almost done with it, but it's a way, again, we felt guilty about this. How many of us get the opportunity to really give to a homeless person or somebody in need on a daily basis in a personal way, or at least, you know, directly kind of connecting them on a one-on-one basis? I mean, short of being a social worker or somebody who's really making intentional effort, it's very hard, especially over here. And in fact, we're in such a kind of socioeconomically segregated society now that we don't really get to reach people. So again, we said, how can we use the tools we have, online tools and crowdsourcing, or it's a little kind of a version of crowdfunding or whatever, yeah. So we said, okay, why don't we work with the vendors, like food trucks and like pizza shops and people like that, even bookstores and things like that, and we'll have them, you know, put stickers up that they're part of this network, and we'll also advertise to social work organizations to let the people who need it know, and word gets around, honestly. So we said, okay, they'll come to the pizza shop, good pizza, and they'll say, hey, you know, I'm on tough times, and I need somebody to cover me, right? Because they'll have the sign. The pizza vendor will then send out a notification to everybody in the network. Inshallah, all of us would be on it. For example, right now, we'd get a notification saying, hey, somebody needs you to buy them a pizza, you know, $10 at Good Pizza, right? And it becomes a competition for good, inshallah, because whoever answers first gets to actually pay, because you can pay instantly, right? We've built that in, and you'll be able to just do that. And if you miss it, it says, sorry, you missed this opportunity. Would you like to buy a credit to be the next person, you know, in line to do it? And then it gives you stats also, showing you got, you know, 10 notifications this last week. You only responded to one, so you have a 10% success rate, right? So, anyways, just another example, inshallah, of using our values, because that was the purpose of the session also. Our values, using crowdsourcing to kind of implement our values, inshallah. So I think what we're going to do is we'll open it up to questions. We were supposed to have another panelist. For whatever reason, they weren't able to make it. But we'll open it up to questions. I can tell you, alhamdulillah, Amany is our director of operations also, in addition to being a co-founder, and alhamdulillah, she knows crowdfunding inside out now, alhamdulillah, and there's an art to it, but there is a science. So if you're thinking about a campaign or something, actually you never mentioned the biggest campaign. How many of you heard about the $100,000 raised for black churches that were burned down? Okay. Oh, sorry, this panel. So how many of you know it was done on LaunchGood? Okay, so that was done on LaunchGood. You know, there was a bunch of people who took the initiative, but they used the platform. They used LaunchGood. And actually, I didn't talk about you should talk about the stats also, but LaunchGood is much more successful actually than Kickstarter and Indiegogo in terms of success rate and whatnot. So that's another thing that happens a lot, you know, with our Muslim community. We think, oh, because it's a Muslim thing, Kickstarter, oh, I got a Kickstarter, that's going to be much better for me, even though I'm doing Lord you know, but whatever. That's a real project. But, all right. Okay, so we'll open it up for a question and answer, inshallah. She had her hand up first.
I'm British Security Director that's about to launch my own production company next month in LA. And now I'm actually looking for somebody to help me, so how do I contact you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a little bit of an awkward setup because our moderator is also missing. So we'll just take turns here. I can give you my card. You can contact me at Amany at launchgood.com. So that's A as in apple, M as in money, A as in apple, N as in no, Y as in Yahoo at launchgood.com. And again, I can pass out a card afterwards. I think we had a question.
It's a great idea, but how many percentage of Muslims know about this? Do you have any?
Right, so that's essentially the challenge. So there are other Muslim crowdfunding sites, but there actually aren't our competition. It's usually the mainstream sites like GoFundMe, Indiegogo, Kickstarter. Because when you think crowdfunding, you think the default, and the default right now for a lot of people isn't necessarily a Muslim crowdfunding site. And so that's kind of an ongoing initiative.
So how many projects you have done successfully?
Yeah, actually, is the internet on? Okay. Can you pull it on? The site, and I can show the case really quickly. Yep, I just got it in the face now, so.
Yeah, we should show that.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're really transparent, so you can see all of our stats on the bottom. Just give it 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, you're not showing the screen. Keep going, keep going, keep going. All right, a little bit lower. More. Okay, so as of date, we've had projects that impacted 31 countries, almost at 4 million crowdfunded, 384 projects, and 20,000 registered donors. And we churn to this October, inshallah, officially. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I used LaunchGood a couple of months ago. I don't know if you were still in the process of upgrading or something, but I got a lot of errors on the site when I used it.
Yeah, so this just got a facelift right before ISNA. Right 2 days ago, we just upgraded the whole site. So totally invite you to try it one more time.
Because I have used GoFundMe before. The user experience was a little bit different when I used LaunchGood, but inshallah I'll try this out.
Absolutely. Another thing to think about is this is a startup. So I think GoFundMe just got bought for about $400 million. $600 million. So we're still in the bootstrapping phase. And I think to have accomplished that success rate in such a short time is pretty impressive. I think there was a question.
One more.
Yes, please.
So how are you marketing this in the Muslim community?
So the best tool is actually projects themselves, right? The projects themselves are the ones that bring users to the site. So one thing we didn't mention is actually a third of donors come back and donate to projects on the site. And the idea is that a lot of Muslims want causes to support. Same thing, a lot of Muslims don't want to reinvent the wheel. They want to see what's already happening. So the biggest really marketing strategy, it's all been organic, honestly. We haven't been doing a lot of sort of paid marketing. It's the projects themselves that bring ideas. So I'll give you an example. We had a campaign back in probably February with Sister Megan Wyatt. And so she had a daughter that wanted to get ready to wear hijab, but she realized that there was no guidebook to show girls who are ready to do that. And so she created like an American-style hijab book for girls with her daughter who was 8. And the cool thing about that was that project by itself had about 500 donors to it. And so those 500 donors got exposed to a new way of, if there's a problem or you're trying to create some sort of educational programming, this was one way to do it. And they got exposed to the platform in terms of using crowdfunding as a tool. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Is your overhead still 8%?
I'm sorry?
Your overhead?
What do you charge?
5%, pretty standard for crowdfunding. Although donors have an option to cover fees. And 2/3 of your donors typically do that if it's a nonprofit.
So the other thing in terms of marketing is, well, obviously, it's getting out and doing presentations too, but, they've had meet and greets with, in different cities with like the LaunchGood fans or whatever, LaunchGooders as we call them, and then also just kind of presentations, on crowdfunding, and how to do it. Because again, as I said, a lot of people have actually tried crowdfunding. They think they can just do it. They get on Kickstarter, and honestly, unfortunately, they have a very high failure rate because it's not, it's not that easy to do. So, doing those workshops and whatnot, that helps also. But the other point I wanted to make is that actually with LaunchGood, the difference is that we also hold your hand a little bit. You don't get that on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or any of these other things. There's a little bit of an education aspect, even within our community. So
384 projects, a lot of projects. So where are the ideas coming from? Usually the organization?
no, actually, they're coming organically from the people themselves. Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. And that's what we're talking about with crowdsourcing. Even, through this, through Whitestone, through whatever, all these, alhamdulillah, we're starting to see, like, people are doing just great stuff. It's just a matter of, kind of collecting it and getting it out there. So I think we'll start to see that.
Does LaunchGood also help with grant writing for nonprofit organizations?
No, unfortunately, it does not. Yeah. So that's not us. I'm trying to think who might help you with that. But maybe Whitestone will come up with a model for that. In fact, it's probably a good idea. Any other questions? Comments? Okay. That's it. All right, Jazakumullah khair for your time, and then I think we're pretty much done.
So do you have information about the organization?
Yeah, if you sorry. You can go to launchgood.com. Yeah, you can go to launchgood.com, and then you can go to the whitestone.org, for both organizations. Inshallah. All right.